Hey guys, how are we doing? Welcome to the Dream Fight doubleheader. Firstly, apologies for being a few minutes late. As always, things decide to go a little bit haywire just before I go on air. So apologies for the camera. I'm using the camera on the laptop instead of the good camera. So it's why it's a little bit blurry. So again, apologies for that. We got in the chat there. We've got Ghetto Matt. Yes, starts. It does, mate. It is starting. The main two or couple of fights won't be on until a little bit later on though. So you got a little bit of time. Damien, Big Barry Hall's on the Sam Goodman card. He is. I saw that today there. Damien. What do we got there? Yep, super. What's that there? It'll be super middle for sure. I'm not quite about that one there, mate. Tommy Dokes, hey Lennon, for the Roy Jones Canelo matchup, what weight class were you thinking for the matchup? Okay, well, we'll go through all that. Obviously, the FOREMAN USYK fight is at heavyweight. I've made the Canelo Roy Jones Jr. fight at middleweight. Okay, now, and the only reason is because I think at super middleweight, I don't think Canelo stands much of a chance at all, to be honest. I think his best chance is at middleweight against Roy Jones Jr. That's where he started, of course, Roy Jones Jr. did. And I think that's where Canelo was at his best, but also with Roy Jones Jr., he's just starting out. I mean, he did obviously win the title and had a few defenses there, but I just think Canelo's best shot at Roy Jones Jr., and I'm just thinking size-wise. I know the same dimensions at middleweight, but the fact that Roy Jones Jr. would be, 8 pounds heavier at super middleweight, I don't think it's the natural weight limit or weight division for Canelo. So I've gone for 160. So we'll get into it in a second there, guys. We'll go through how it's going to work. And again, it's not the best surroundings I've got here, but we'll make do. It's all about the content, not the picture, isn't it? So there's, Luis Puente. Is that how you pronounce it there? Salute from California. G'day, mate. Welcome to the show. Yes, Tommy, 160 pounds. All right, so I suppose the big question here is which fight is the main event? To lay the foundation here for what we're going to do, this is at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, so not T-Mobile Arena, not the MGM Grand. We're going to need the biggest stadium in Las Vegas for this, and I'm pretty sure, is it 60, 70, 80,000 people they can get into Las Vegas, into Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas? Well, that's where we're going to have it. Now, originally I thought that maybe FOREMAN USYK would be the main event, but look, I'm probably thinking as far as appeal goes, it would be Canelo and Roy Jones Jr., but it doesn't really matter, I suppose. Let me know what you guys think. But so there's the matchups there. So we've got George Foreman, Alexander Usyk at heavyweight, and we have Canelo Alvarez, Roy Jones Jr. at middleweight for the World Middleweight Championship. So I'll wait for a couple of comments to come through there. Who should be main event? I'm probably thinking, I think you got to go with the heavyweights, don't you? As good as the Canelo Jones Jr. fight would be by itself, I think we've got to go with the heavyweights. You can't get any bigger than the world heavyweight title, and you couldn't really have the heavyweight title fight on the undercard of a big fight, could you? So, yeah, thanks, Damien. Yep, heavyweight has to be the main event. I agree. So we'll go through it, guys. I won't take up too much tonight. I know that everyone's going to be watching the Premier Boxing Series here in Australia. It's on 7 Plus. So you can check that out in another hours or so time. But in the meantime, we want your full attention here for the big dream fight doubleheader. Tommy says Roy started at 154, but only had 1 or 2 fights, and he had to move up to 160. Yeah, he was just a brilliant fighter, wasn't he? All right, so we're in agreement. We are going to have the the FOREMAN Usyk fight as the main event, which means we'll start with Canelo Alvarez and Roy Jones Jr. All right, so there you can see the matchup there. So the World Middleweight Championship. And we're going to start first. We'll go through the records of each fighter, significant wins they've had. I think we all know the losses they've had, but it's probably more about the wins they've had. And the thing is with these guys, they've had multiple big wins, especially these two guys here. So we'll go over the greatest hits, and then we'll get into who we think wins and why. And then we can agree to disagree. All right, so we'll start with Canelo Alvarez. So you can see there, 61, 2-2, 39 KOs. Won the junior middleweight championship, or super welterweight it was, WBC, at the against Matthew Hatton. I was actually at that fight, as a little bit of a side note, in California. That was 2011. Held that belt to 2015. Then moved up and beat Miguel Cotto or Cotto, whatever you want to pronounce it, wherever you're from, for the middleweight championship for the WBA. I think that was held that belt from 2015 to 2019. That light heavyweight champion, just in the 1 year, had that one fight against Sergey Kovalev. And then a super middleweight belt he won in 2020, the first version of that belt, and of course has been the champion ever since. So you can see there his greatest hits. And look, this is arguable as well. I've just plucked, in my opinion, probably the top 5 or 6 there. So I've got Miguel Cotto. Even though he had a lot of fights at 154, I think his first real significant scalp was Miguel Cotto, of those real elite fighters back in the day. And Miguel Cotto, to be fair, was probably not a natural middleweight anyway. He was more of a 154 pounder. So that was 2015, had the 12-round decision. Arguably, the Gennady-Golovkin fights were arguable, probably the first 2 of them anyway. Regardless of what you thought of the first fight, I thought Canelo Alvarez really put the record straight in the second fight with Gennady-Golovkin. I've got that as just a real highlight of his career. That was in 2018. I got the Sergey Kovalev in 2019, the 11th round stoppage. That one could probably have an asterisk beside it, I think, if you really wanted to look at it. I'm not sure Kovalev turned up in exactly great condition, and a little bit questionable towards the end, where he was pretty happy to take the count. But anyway, that's all, again, arguable. I thought the 8th round stoppage of Billy Joe Saunders in 2021 was a really, really good performance by Canelo. I think Saunders was very underrated. Hasn't obviously done anything since, but I think he was a really, really good fighter, and I thought that win by Saunders over Saunders was an excellent win by Canelo. Then we've got the 11th round stoppage over Caleb Plant for the other version of the super middleweight belt in 2021 as well. And I think his most recent fight against Jaime Munguia, a few weeks back, in defense of those titles, was a really good performance by Jaime Munguia. But there's probably a few others we could throw in there as well, but I think they would be his greatest hits. There's Andre. How you going there, mate? Welcome to the show. Canelo win over Jacobs was good. Yeah, that's not a bad point, Tommy. I sort of had that sort of in my mix, but I ended up going for those ones there. But I mean, we've only got so much room on the page, haven't we? That's probably why I've gone for those ones. You could probably fit another 3 or 4 in there. And just as equally hard is his opponent, the legendary Roy Jones Jr., 66-10. With 47 K, or 66 and 10 with 47 KOs. Now, a lot of those 10 losses were towards the end of his career, so I don't think we can take too much out of them. We're looking at prime Roy Jones Jr. You can see there he won the middleweight title over Hopkins in 1993. Only held it for a year before moving up to super middleweight. Won the super middleweight belt, held that for 2 years. Light heavyweight was probably his peak division, I think. And you can see there he held those titles for 7 years between 96 and 2003. And the WBA heavyweight title in 2003, who could forget that, moving up to heavyweight. Now, I remember back in the day when Michael Spinks did it against Larry Holmes, he came up from 175. Roy Jones Jr. has come all the way from 160. Just an amazing effort from him. I know John Ruiz wasn't the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, but still a really, really good scalp for Roy Jones. And he went straight back down, which was probably to his detriment in some ways when you think about it. I don't think he was ever the same fighter when he moved down from heavyweight. I mean, it's massive to go to 200 plus, back down to 175, and the level of competition he was fighting at that stage too. So it probably just didn't augur well for just the up and down in weight. So you can see there his greatest hits, the 12-round decision over Bernard Hopkins in 93 for his first world title bout. Now that was on the undercard from memory of a Riddick-Bowe fight. Was it Jesse Ferguson? I think it might have been him. I can't remember. But to think that Roy Jones Jr. versus Bernard Hopkins was on the undercard of a non-title heavyweight fight is just amazing in hindsight. So that was 93. I think James Toney in 1994 was a massive win, another all-time great. Mike McCallum, yet another all-time great in 96. the 4th round stoppage of Virgil Hill, if you can remember the body shot in 1998. The win over John Ruiz just purely because of the magnitude of moving all the way up to heavyweight to win a belt was just one of the greatest things you'll ever see. That was 2003. And I thought the first fight with Antonio Tarver, the 12-round decision over him, was probably, again, in his best wins. And then, of course, Tarver flipped the script in the rematch, and the rest is history. And again, Roy Jones Jr. was just never really the same after that, was he? So there's the two combatants. We have Canelo Alvarez and Roy Jones Jr. duking it out for the World Middleweight Championship. So I'm going to give my sort of rundown about how I think the fight would go. And by all means, this is why I do it live. I know I get a lot of views and a lot of comments after the fact, but this is why I do it live, because it's great to, I won't say debate with you guys live, but at least discuss it and see who we think wins. I want to get a few of your comments first before I give you my breakdown. So what I'm going to do is a few of the strengths and weaknesses of both guys, and then how I think the fight would pan out. So we've got Tommy there for starters. James Toney, going into the Roy fight in 1994, was undefeated, beating Nunn, McCallum and Iran Barkley, and was ranked pound for pound number 3, only behind Sweet Pea and Chavez. That's the best win for either, in my opinion. Look, I've probably got to agree with that, Tommy. That win over James Toney, and look, James Toney is just an all-time great, obviously a Hall of Famer, like both of them. Well, Canelo's not in there yet, but he'll be in first ballot Hall of Famer, won't he? Roy Jones Jr., of course, is in there. But you're right. You're right. I think James Toney, it's just a little bit unfortunate he was in the same era as Roy Jones Jr., because he could have been the dominant super middleweight, light heavyweight, whatever you want to say. I know Bernard Hopkins might have been in there. And isn't it a shame that those two never fought, Bernard Hopkins and James Toney? What a fight that would have been. And I don't think they ever fought, did they? Unless that was later on in their career anyway. But that's probably one of those big fights we sort of missed out on. But I'm with you there, Tommy. I think James... And got to remember, Michael Nunn, he was probably in the top 2 or 3 pound for pound when he was... And I know it's hard to believe now. And of course, he had the prison stint after that as well. But I remember when he beat Frank Tate for the IBF belt, demolished Sambu Kalambe, who had beaten Mike McCallum for the WBA belt. I mean, he was on fire. And he was a fighter that they were comparing to the likes of Sugar Ray Leonard back in the day. Probably a great example and a great reason not to jump the gun a lot on these fighters and maybe judge them after they've finished up. Because Michael Nunn, after that knockout loss to James Toney, was just never the same, and was beaten quite regularly, I think, after that. So, Damien, what do you got there, mate? I'm a massive Canelo fan, but I don't think anyone touches Jones Jr. in his prime. All right, well, yeah, Tommy, Nunn was the man. Michael's second to none. Great name. But I remember he beat Frank Tate, and Frank Tate was the silver medalist at the 84 Olympics. He was probably recognised again. I won't say in a really top pound-for-pound fighters, but I think most people maybe had him just in the top 10 and was touted as being one of the, or probably going to be the dominant heavyweight now that Hagler and Leonard and Duran and Hearns had all sort of gone. And that was a big upset win. And then, as I said, he was the man after that, and it didn't end well for Michael Nunn. But that's boxing for you, isn't it? It's very cruel sometimes. So I think the strengths of both guys, I think with Canelo Alvarez, I think it's pretty obvious. He's got the power. He's got the ring nous, ring IQ, underrated defense. Probably his weakness, even at middleweight, even though he's at super middle now, we're putting him back to middleweight. Probably his size, I suppose, is probably the biggest flaw I can probably pick, and probably a little bit, and especially in the case with Roy Jones Jr., the leg speed. He's not really fast on his feet. He relies sometimes on just cutting the ring off, breaking his opponents down over the rounds, or have them come to him so he doesn't really have to move at all. So they're probably the two key weaknesses, and that's probably not a great thing if you're coming up against Roy Jones Jr. A lack of size. We know he's strong, Canelo, but that strength and all that means nothing against someone like Roy Jones Jr., who was so just quick and just nimble on his feet, lightning fast with his punches, and the leg speed, I think, would be a little bit of an issue for Canelo Alvarez. For Roy Jones Jr., I mean, that's pretty obvious. As I just said, great hand speed. He had that really long reach as well, really long arms. So the speed, the footwork, and I suppose the only way to define it is just that natural ability, just an unbelievably gifted fighter, and something that you cannot teach a fighter. He just the ability to be in and out and not get hit, the head movement, that, as I said, the hand speed, just everything with Roy Jones Jr. A lot of it you simply can't teach. You might have someone, maybe even like a Canelo. I mean, probably can't teach his defensive nous, but just his overall ability and the way he cuts fighters down and just rolls with the punches and makes them counters with good punches. So little things you can't teach. But overall, look, on paper, let's just say I think this fight looks awesome. Canelo Alvarez, Roy Jones Jr., two of the biggest names to probably ever step foot in the ring. On the poster, it would be great. Alvarez or Canelo versus Jones Jr. It would be great. Unfortunately, in this case, I can't remember who said it before. It was Damien, wasn't it? I'm a massive Canelo fan. I think he's been great for the sport, for what he's brought to the sport. But I just cannot see him being able to get anywhere near Roy Jones Jr. And the reason why is the height difference for starters and the reach. Now, that's a big thing. And even though Canelo is such a gifted fighter and has been able to break down fighters that are taller and have longer reach than Roy Jones Jr., they aren't Roy Jones Jr. The Kovalovs and Callum Smiths and Caleb Plants and all these types of guys, and even the Bivols, they aren't Roy Jones Jr. And Tommy, you hit it on the head there, mate. Athleticism gap is pretty wide. Well, it is. And in this case here, you would probably see Canelo, he'd be coming forward, he'd be shuffling forward, but Roy Jones Jr. just simply wouldn't be there. In the long reach, he'd be snapping the jab out at Canelo. Canelo would be doing his best to slip and weave and everything to get inside, but if he did get inside, as we've all seen numerous times, Roy Jones Jr. is gone. I think his angles, the side steps, the pivots, the kick arounds, all that sort of stuff, I just don't see Canelo being able to get close to even have a chance to show us what he has with the hands. I think Roy would be in and out. He'd be leading with his right. He'd be leading with his left. He'd be moving off to the right, moving back to the left. He'd be in. He'll be very, very tough for Canelo. And that's not running, by the way. I think that gets confused a little bit sometimes with running away from a fighter. Roy Jones Jr. was never a runner. He would box. He would keep you at a distance. He'd be in, out, left and right. He'd lead with an uppercut. He'd lead with a hook. He'd lead with a body shot. And that's what was so great about Roy Jones Jr., because he could do that and not get hit in return. So for me, I just think Roy Jones Jr. would just be way too slick, way too big, too many advantages physically. And I just don't see Canelo just being able to lay a glove on Roy Jones Jr. So, and it probably wasn't until I actually had to think about this fight, because when I put these together, I just picked two of the biggest fights would have loved to have seen back in the day. And this on paper was great. And then the more I thought about it, I was just thinking about the last couple of days when I decided I was going to do it tonight. I thought, I just can't see Canelo Alvarez just getting anywhere near Roy Jones. And there's not many fighters I would probably say that about when I'm thinking Canelo, because thinking of Canelo, because I think Canelo, and I know he's pulverizing. It's a lot of people offside, especially these days when he is the biggest name in the sport, and he can pick and choose and fight someone and not fight other people. I understand that, but put all that aside and look at him as his career goes. Undisputed in 3 different divisions, I think at least 2. Has fought and beat all the best fighters of his generation, apart from Bivol and Mayweather, of course, but especially Mayweather. I mean, that's Mayweather. Enough said. He's the Floyd Mayweather of Roy Jones Jr. of his generation. So there's not many fighters I think that I would look at with Canelo right through history, from 154 to 168, because it's only been around about 35 years, but anyone from 154 to 168, there's not many fighters I would look at and go, yeah, I would not give Canelo a chance against those fighters. But Roy Jones Jr., for me, is the one, or the only one, I think, that I'm looking at it thinking, I just cannot see any way that Canelo Alvarez can win this fight. I don't think he would be, as I said, fast enough on his feet to get close enough to Roy Jones Jr. to close the gap. I don't think he's got long enough reach to be able to actually land with Jones if he does get close enough. I think Jones would be the way he snapped back and everything else, I just don't see Canelo being able to get close to Roy Jones Jr. I don't think he stops Canelo, but I think it would be a shutout win. I think Roy Jones Jr. would have enough respect for Canelo and obviously enough belief in himself that he would just slice and dice all night, be in and out, and I just think he would win pretty much every round against Canelo Alvarez. And as I said, Canelo not really getting close enough to do any damage whatsoever. So what do you got there, Justin? Justin Footit. How you going there, Justin? Canelo Duran at super middle would be interesting. Now, that's a really, really good fight. And I think probably middleweight again, Justin. I think because very similar in size. I think Duran might even be an inch or so shorter than Canelo. But that stylistically would be a really good fight. Would it be 154? Obviously, Canelo couldn't go any lower than 154. But I think even maybe 160. I have done dream fights in here before with him against Hagler. I think we did him against Hearns, but I don't think we've ever done him against Duran. Now, and another one I would even love to see him against would be someone like Vinny Pazienza. Vinny Pazienza is not really spoken about in terms of being the all-time greats, even though he's my favourite fighter of all time, apart from our Aussies, of course. Vinny Paz. That would probably be an entertaining fight with Canelo as well, because Vinny Paz, tough as nails, and he just comes to fight. I think his speed would probably upset Canelo a little bit as well, and his willingness to get in there and trade, who knows, but there's some other fights I think would be entertaining for Canelo. There's Bill. How you going, mate? First fight tonight is a cracker from what I've watched. Ace Boxing have a good fights, if not better fights, and No Limit, just my opinion. Thanks, Bill, for rubbing it in. I didn't sort of, well, I'm going to watch it a little bit later, but I thought we might be able to get away with the first hour without having to watch it, but that's cool. Put us both on at the same time. Tommy, at 160, Roy stopped 13 or 15 guys. Hopkins said when they met at 160, the hand speed was a huge factor. Well, it's against McCallum as well. All those great fighters. Even Virgil Hill, I thought he was maybe a little bit surprised by Roy's power and his speed. Look, I think no matter what fighter he fought around that time, when he was peak Roy Jones Jr., this is the thing I think sometimes gets a little bit forgotten with Roy Jones Jr. A lot of the, what do you want to call them, the newer fans these days, remember Roy Jones Jr. in the last probably 3 to 4 years of his career. I mean, even the Felix Trinidad fight, especially the Hopkins fight, I don't even want to talk about the Danny Green fight. He was just a shutout. And even though he did get the win over Felix Trinidad, it wasn't a really, great fight or exciting fight. Both guys well past the peak. I love to think back to those fights with Roy Jones Jr., against the Tonys and McCallums and these types of guys. Just a brilliant, brilliant fighter. So, not sure what you guys think. There's D-Style. How are you, mate? 8-4 over Canelo. I would probably have it 9-3, if not 10-2 or something D-Style. I just say, mate, I just can't see how Canelo gets close enough to land anything meaningful on Roy Jones Jr. Tommy says, when Roy beat Paz, I believe he went on to win another world title. I think he did from memory too, Tommy. I used to love Vinny Pazienza. Probably more so at 135 to 140, if I'm being honest. I used to love, the fights with Greg Haugen and Camacho. And the one fight I would have liked to have seen, although I've got a feeling it mightn't have ended well for Paz, is Julio Cesar Chavez. He's probably the only one that Paz didn't fight back in the day. And Greg Haugen fought Chavez as well, but I mean, he was a great fighter as well, wasn't he, Haugen? Well, actually, I'll take that. Not a great fighter, but a great fighter for the era. Just fought everybody. So, what do we got there? You can't stop Canelo with a sledgehammer, so it would definitely be a decision win for Roy for me. Yeah, I agree. Hanoi Tripper says, hi all, do you think Foreman sleeps USYK early? Shavers versus USYK. Well, we're going to get to that in 2 seconds there, Hanoi, so we'll have a discussion about that one. So my synopsis or decision on this one, if that's what you want to call it, I just think, again, Roy Jones Jr. wins pretty much a shutout for me against Canelo Alvarez, and that's hard for me to say because I'm a big Canelo Alvarez fan. I think he is the second best Mexican of all time. I know that'll be controversial. I think Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. is still the best for me. You probably think of one or two others in there like Oliveras and Zarate and Sanchez and these types of guys, of course, Barrera and Morales, but I think for me he'll be number 2. But I love Canelo. It's been great for the sport, but again, Roy Jones Jr. just has too many tools, too many assets, and I think he wins fairly comfortably over Canelo Alvarez. All right, guys, let's get on to the main event. What's that there? Who's that there? Yeah, boy, Ralph. Tony versus Hopkins. Yeah, well, I just said before, mate, that would have been a great fight, wouldn't it? Tony versus Hopkins, but unfortunately, we never got it. All right, let's get into the main event and still keep going with your comments there, guys. I'll come back. There's about a 30-second delay. The main event of the evening, and I'm speaking of the heavyweight championship of the world. George Foreman, Alexander Usyk. I'm going for the 1974 or slash 1973-74 version of George Foreman, and I'm going for the current model, or whatever you want to call it, current version of Alexander Usyk. Get some comments as we keep going there. I think Salvador Sanchez was the most talented Mexican fighter ever. Shame his career was cut short. An absolute tragedy, Tommy. 23 years of age. And at 23, he'd already beaten Azuma Nelson, Wilfredo Gomez, Danny Little Red Lopez. This was a guy at 23 years of age. I think could have been the greatest Mexican of all time, but we'll never know. To think that he got killed in a car accident only weeks after beating Azuma Nelson, a future great Azuma Nelson, that is. It's just hard to get your head around that at 23 years of age, we lost him. So, and if there's going to be a movie made about a fighter, I would love to see it about Salvador Sanchez. But that's another story entirely. So let's focus on the main event, Big George Foreman and Alexander Usyk. Let's start with George Foreman. You can see there 76-5, 68 KOs. Two-time heavyweight champion, 1973. He didn't have. This is the thing about George Foreman. Didn't hold the heavyweight title for long either time he had it. So 73-74 as the first time heavyweight champion, and in 94-95 for the second time. Didn't actually lose the title in the ring. He was stripped of certain titles and fought and won. I know he fought and lost, obviously, to Tommy Morrison. That was for the WBO belt. But correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't actually lose the belts in the ring. He was stripped of the title. So that's a little bit of a shame. But you can see there his greatest hits, the second round knockout of Joe Frazier in 1973 to win the heavyweight title for the first time. The destruction of Kenny Norton in 1974. Fifth round knockout of Ron Lyle in 75. A repeat knockout of Joe Frazier in 76. And the second career, the second round knockout of Jerry Cooney. I know Jerry Cooney's not an all-time great of the ring, but if you haven't seen that knockout, check it out. An unbelievable knockout. I think it was just the left uppercut. It's pretty much made Jerry Cooney freeze on the spot, and then the big overhand right sent him to the canvas. It was crazy. And then, of course, the knockout of Michael Moorer in 94 to win the world heavyweight title at 45, I think, from memory. The oldest man ever to win the world heavyweight title. So a very special man or fighter is Big George Foreman. On to his opponent, Alexander Usyk, 22-0, 14 KOs. Undisputed cruiserweight champion, but from 2016 to 2019. And, of course, the undisputed heavyweight champion from 2021 onwards. Won a version of the belt or belts against Anthony Joshua, and obviously just unified it last weekend against Tyson Fury. So there's his greatest hits. The 12-round win over Marius Briedis in 2018. The 8th round stoppage of Tony Bellew in 2018 as well. The 2 wins over Joshua, 2021 and 2022. The 9th round stoppage of Daniel Dubois. And, of course, he's probably I think his biggest win of his career, the 12-round decision over Tyson Fury, as I said last week. So, all right, get the comments going there, guys. I'll break down the strengths and weaknesses of both these guys, and I'll get to the comments as we go. So Hanoi Tripper says, I started watching Foreman's documentary. Impressive dude. Have you seen the movie? Make sure you check it out. I was a little bit critical of the movie, I will say. It was well done, but they just rushed through it. They decided to go from his the time where he started to box until when he finished up, and it was just way too much crammed into an hour and 40, whatever it might have been. They should have done what they did with the Ali movie, quickly skimmed over his early years and got straight to the point of the most important part of his career. Different careers, of course, Ali and Foreman. Foreman's is probably more eventful over the whole journey, and Ali was in that Fraser-Foreman era, just one of those enigmas that everyone had to know exactly what was going on with. 90s Foreman stops USYK late. Okay, there's Carl. Got Big George. All right, well, let's get into the strengths and weaknesses of both guys. Now, let's start with George Foreman. The strengths, of course, well, that's, again, very, very obvious. It's his size and power. And I think he was underrated as far as, especially in his first career, and this is when this fight takes place, his ability to cut the ring off. Very nimble on his toes. If you look at him carefully, he wasn't a plotter. I know Muhammad Ali dubbed him the mummy, but you look at his feet against Foreman, Fraser, these types, got very nimble on his feet. He was able to change direction quickly, always on his toes, wasn't flat-footed, didn't land with the heel, he landed on the toes, and he was very, very good at being on his feet and changing direction, and more importantly, cutting off the ring. And when he had you caught, just that was it. It was all over. So that was strength, and of course his power, the one-punch power. Even though he didn't have a lot of one-punch knockouts, it was that one punch that really started the rot. So that one punch, he would really get you hurt, and then it was the accumulation that would just get you out of there. So it wasn't that Mike Tyson-esque type of punch where it was just one punch and that was it. He really liked to play on his feet, hurt you with a couple of shots or one shot, and then as soon as he hurt his prey, that was it. He would get you out of there. Tommy says, I think Ali, Holmes, Young styles cause Foreman problems. USYK has to get inside to do his best work. Okay, it's an interesting way to look at it. And I see him getting caught with something. How big of a size difference? I haven't got the exact measurements in front of me there, Tommy, but I'm pretty sure, well, USYK was what, 225 or something like that last weekend? And I'm pretty sure he's about 6'2", 6'3". So back in the day, he would have been actually a half-decent size, well, a good size heavyweight. I'm pretty sure he had the same dimensions as Muhammad Ali. So you can look at that. Then that probably gives you an idea. So not a small heavyweight, even though we all think of him as a blown-up cruiserweight. You seen him last week, very, very solid heavyweight. And it's just because the likes of Joshua and Wilder and Fury are just so big, and Dubois. But back in this era, would have just been the average size heavyweight. Yep, Hanoi, check out the movie. It's really good. Yeah, thanks, D-Style. There's actually not a huge size difference, but a huge power difference, that's for sure. All right, so on to, and his weaknesses, of course. His weaknesses were the fact that he was very one-dimensional. Even though he had that good footwork, he just liked to plant his feet and just wing the left hook or the right hook, if that's what you want to call it, or the right uppercut or the left uppercut. And a lot of the times only through one punch at a time, unless he had you hurt and then look out. And probably his IQ wasn't the greatest, hence the pun with Muhammad Ali. The fact he didn't or couldn't see what Muhammad Ali was doing, even though I suppose not a lot of other people did as well, that he couldn't see that the game plan that Muhammad Ali adopted for that fight, he did not change 1 second of the fight. Muhammad Ali laid on the ropes and he just winged away, and even when he probably saw that he couldn't hurt Muhammad Ali, or the odds of getting him out of there was very high, he did not change his game plan whatsoever. So probably his ring IQ is probably probably his downfall in this type of situation as well. For Alexander Usyk, I think I'll just go to. We've got his. Yep. Okay, so his strengths, obviously, his ring IQ is a massive strength of his. He can adapt to any style. And we saw that with Fury. Started well. Fury came back over the top of him, and then he came back over him. He changed mid-fight to be able to go with Fury and change tactics and get back on top. So that's a really big asset for Alexander Usyk. I think he's not an overly fast guy, but he is a lot. He tends to be a lot faster than the guys he fights, obviously because of the size difference. I think his footwork's pretty good. But I think mainly it's just being able to do everything okay. And that ring IQ, I think, gets him a long way as well. His weaknesses, even though he has had some big knockouts and he did rock Fury as well, I don't think he's a massive puncher. I don't think he's really... Look, I've said it before. He's not really a great boxer. He's not really a great puncher. But what he is, he's just that guy who just gets the job done. But the only thing is, again, with his weakness too, he has the tendency to be able to get caught, and whether he can stay with someone like Foreman is something we would have to look at as well. I've just missed a couple of comments there. Sorry, guys. Carl says how Ali stayed on his feet in the Rumbling Jungle was insane. If you look at it carefully, though, Carl, he wasn't taking big shots. Yes, he took a lot of punishment, but you look at him, he was leaning back, he was gloves, elbows, shoulders, whatever he needed to do. If you look at him, he didn't really take, or if any big flush shots at any stage of that fight. And that was the genius of Muhammad Ali. As I said, rolling with the punches, tying him up, going back with the punch to take off the effectiveness of it. Just the fight of the ages for Muhammad Ali. So, but not just the one punch, but the fact that he took so many punches to the body, the shoulders, the elbows, you name it, and he was still standing is, again, credit to him. But as I said, I didn't really see any real flush punches to the head that would have done Muhammad Ali any damage. Foreman landed a 6-punch body combo on Ali without getting hit. Yeah, well, look, that was probably the thing he did do well in the fight. He went to the body. The problem is, as I said, Ali was having no dramas, just being able to take the punishment and not being hit with those big flush shots. So, and as I said before, that was one of the flaws, I think, of Foreman back then. He just had no ring IQ or boxing IQ to change tactics mid-fight. And surprisingly, his corner didn't either. He wouldn't have thought at some stage the corner would have picked up on what was going on and said, George, you've got to wind down for a couple of rounds. Now, go hard for a round. He's not fighting back. You're winning the rounds. So go hard for a round and then maybe take it easy for a round. Go hard for a round and take it easy for a round. I know that's just a whole different conversation. But anyway, Foreman versus Ron Lyle, you watch at least once a year. Ripper fight. I think it's the best war considering the power of both guys. Incredible heart and guts. Yeah, if you haven't seen that fight, guys, make sure you check out Foreman and Ron Lyle. They both hit the deck. It was a great fight. The rope-a-dope, yep, certainly was. D-style. It was awesome when Pacquiao did his version of rope-a-dope versus Cotto early, yeah. That's a good point, actually, D-style. I've never really thought of that, but you're right. George wouldn't, what's that there? George wouldn't get to him, USYK, on points or late stoppage. Jeez, Glenn. Okay, I'm interested to hear your rebuttals to that there, guys. He's real elusive. Okay, so I've got a little bit of love here for USYK. Foreman IQ was better when he got older. I do agree with that, Tommy. Much better punch placement and patience. I said it last show. Wish I saw 77 to 87 Foreman. Yeah, who knows what version we would have got then, Tommy. I'm with you though, and I do 100% agree that the second coming of George Foreman, totally different fighter. Took his time, picked his punches. Obviously, he had to. He didn't have the energy and the youth that he had 10 years earlier. It's amazing to think he was only out for 10 years. It seemed to be a lot longer. He came back in 87, and I think he had something like 20 or 25 fights in like 2 years or 3 years. Just an amazing schedule that he kept. Obviously, he was running out of time. He had to have a crack. And you remember, I think one of the most, or the fights where I had the most respect for George Foreman was the Evander Holyfield fight. Evander Holyfield just hit him with everything. And he did not go down. I'm sure he would have been rocked at some stage. You couldn't blame him because, I mean, Holyfield hit him with everything. But the heart he showed in that fight, the smarts that he showed in that fight to be able to hang with Holyfield for 12 rounds, I thought that was great. And I think it held him in good stead when he fought Mora, 4 years later. They were D-style. The ropes were very loose. And again, look at the fight. Ali leaning back as much as he could on those ropes. And he absorbed a lot of those punches by moving back with you could see the punches coming obviously, and move back with the punches, and in close, even in the clinches, he would lean back as much as he could. So yeah, some shenanigans going on there, mate. Ali was ahead on the card when he beat George. Is that right? I've never actually seen the scorecards. I only watched it about 6 months to a year ago as well. So I thought, well, I would have had it probably even, I suppose, Glenn. But that's interesting that he was ahead on the scorecards. So hang on, we'll go back to D-style there. USYK beats younger Foreman, in my opinion. Older Foreman beats him, though, more cerebral and patient. Okay, that's a interesting take, mate. Tommy says, I think Foreman's team just figured he'd KO Norton and Fraser. Easy 2 guys that Ali struggled, that he would do the same to Ali. Big mistake, wasn't it, though, Tommy? I don't think you'd see that these days. Although happened with Mike Tyson's crew, didn't not that he had anyone resembling a half a decent corner guys in his corner. Who was it? It was Aaron Snowell. I remember Richie Chetty, I think his name was. They were there early, and then he had sort of no names towards. I know who else was it? But yeah, with Tyson, and he just sort of run his own show, and again was never the same fighter. What's that? AI money. All right, well, on to the fight itself, guys. This is the way I see it. Again, this is the 1973-74 version of George Foreman. I think it would be a tricky fight for George Foreman, and if he fought the way he did against Ali, I could see Usyk maybe being able to outbox him, but I've got to break it down. You're going by, you're guessing, aren't we? I mean, we just don't know, but I can see Foreman obviously being the aggressor. I don't think Usyk, even though he tried it against Fury, I don't think you would see him come out and try and take George Foreman on in centre ring and be the aggressor. So I think he's on his bike. I'm just not sure Usyk has got he probably has got the IQ, whether he's got the ability to be able to get away from Foreman early. Foreman, very, very dangerous in the first 4 or 5 rounds. That's where the danger period for Alexander Usyk is. So I would think if he was smart, my advice to him would be for the first 4 rounds, you do not engage with George Foreman. You box smart. You don't let him just dictate everything, but you box smart. You tie him up in close when you can. Give him angles as much as you can, but don't engage with him too much in those first 4 rounds. And let's just take the sting out of George Foreman and then maybe come on later in the fight. My gut feel in this fight, though, is that Foreman would be able to get to Usyk early, and if he did, he could really do some damage on Alexander Usyk early. But does he get him out of there? Does it go the distance? These are the questions we have to ask. I'm going to go with George Foreman, strangely enough, by decision. Now, this might surprise a lot of you guys out there. I think Foreman wins the first 4, 5, even 6 rounds by that aggression. I think Usyk's reluctance. And by the time he comes on, I think George, even in that first period of his career, had a level of durability and stamina. I mean, I know he didn't show it with Ali, but he kept punching right to the end. And remember, this is a 12-round fight, not 15. So I think Foreman would win enough of the early rounds to have a buffer. I think Usyk would come home quite strongly. And I think Foreman hangs on 7 rounds to 5. Now, that might seem completely odd to everyone out there that we're not seeing either a knockout for Foreman or maybe a points decision to Usyk. But I just think Foreman is aggressive enough early, throws enough punches early that he builds up a lead. But on the other hand, I think Usyk's got enough nous and smarts to survive. But I think he would be behind well and truly after the first half of the fight. And you would still think that Foreman might be able to eke out around the last 5 or 6 rounds. He might be able to just get one. And I think Foreman, strange enough, wins by decision. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but I'm just picturing the fight in my mind. As I said, I think Foreman dominates early, and then when Usyk comes back, I just think Foreman will be able to hang in there and win 7 rounds to 5. Let me have it, guys. Let me know what you think. Holyfield said a puncher like Mike Tyson, more wider, is easier to defend, but those straight arms like the ones down the pipe like George were more devastating. Okay, that's an interesting take. I don't think Usyk's jab is good enough. Good call there, mate. And that's why I just can't see him winning the early rounds. Like Ali, he still pumped the jab in Foreman's face, just to give him something to think about and make it not as easy to get inside. And when he was inside, he was able to tie him up. I suppose the bottom line with this is that Alexander Usyk, as good as he's been, or great as he's been, whatever you want to call it, is not Muhammad Ali. And I just can't see him being able to do to Foreman what Ali did. And yes, I know fighters like Ron Lyle dropped Foreman and Jimmy Young beat Foreman. I think that was a jaded version of George at the time. I don't think his heart was in it. I just can't see Alexander Usyk winning this fight. And probably, I don't disagree with D-Style much, but I probably think Usyk beats the 90s version of George. I could just see a little bit of a repeat of the Holyfield type of fight with Foreman, where Fury's sorry, not Fury, Usyk's work rate and his stamina and all that would be too much for George. But at this time of his career, I just think George would have a little bit too much for Usyk. But let me know what you think there, guys. Decision, yeah, I'm on drugs, yeah. I know it sounds stupid, Glenn. I really do. I know to think that George Foreman could beat Usyk on points, that just sounds ridiculous. But as I said, I just think he builds up enough of a lead early by dominate. He's the way he started early in his fights, but I don't think he'd have enough to get Usyk out of there. I think Usyk's too smart. And too much IQ to be knocked out. And I just think he hangs, comes home strong, and Foreman wins by decision. So, Mutzi says Usyk has grown into his power. Fury's game plan didn't account for the power Usyk has grown into. Yeah, look, don't get me wrong. I mean, Usyk's become, one of the best heavyweights of all time. I had him in my top 10 there, Glenn, and I got a little bit of a flack over that. But, I think overall his accomplishments would say that he's in the top 10. But again, they say styles make fights. And I just think George Foreman wins his fight. And look, having said that as well, I mean, we've seen Usyk being hurt. Fury hurt him to the body. It wouldn't surprise me if Foreman could get him out of there early. I just think Usyk's just smart enough and savvy enough just to stay out of range and clinch and hold and move and everything else, and retaliate when he needs to, just to hang in there. But I just think Foreman would win 7 out of the 12 rounds, and even though Usyk would come home pretty strong, I just think George would hang on. Well, I think you're forgetting the issues of southpaws. How many did George fight in his career? Great point, Glenn. Good point. Well, great point. I'm assuming not many. It wasn't. I don't remember really any southpaw heavyweights back in the day. Glenn, let me know if you can. I'm not sure. I can't really remember a half decent southpaw heavyweight back in the day. Let me know if you can think of any out there. But good point. Would he adapt? I suppose we'll never know. But do you think Fury does better versus Foreman? Fury does have a better jab. Yes, Tommy. And I know that sounds silly after the events of last week, but I think Tommy Dokes there. I think that Fury would actually have a great chance against George Foreman. I think if you look at someone like a Deontay Wilder, now I'm not saying Deontay Wilder's in the class of George Foreman, but a similar style, or he used to be anyway. I don't know what the hell he did in his last fight, but big, strong, devastating one-punch knockout puncher, just a big guy, and Fury outboxed him, even outpunched him at certain stages. I think Foreman's a lot more dangerous than what Wilder is. Wilder just has that one big right hand, and that's about it. Foreman can knock you out with uppercuts, with body shots, you name it. He can knock you out with either hand. So he'd be dangerous, but I think he would be more suitable to a Tyson Fury. Anthony Joshua's probably another one. I think George Foreman knocks Anthony Joshua out pretty comfortably just by styles again. But to answer your question there, Tommy, yeah, I think Fury, because he's got a good jab, good movement on his feet too for such a big fella. And we know he can hang there with the big punches. So, yeah, I think he would give Foreman a fight. But that's a really interesting one, though. Who would win out of Fury and Foreman? Don't know. Maybe we'll have to do that down the track as well. Mutzi says Foreman still stops him. Yeah, well, as I said, mate, I wouldn't be surprised, but I just think Usyk's just got enough in his repertoire to be able to hang with Foreman and not be knocked out, although it would not surprise me if that did happen. But either way, I just see George Foreman, the 70s version, 73, 74 version, just being a bit too much for Usyk, no matter how you looked at it. Glenn Fury's jab is average at best. Yeah, but I don't. It's the way he throws it though, Glenn. It's a little bit awkward the way he throws it. He sort of snaps it out. He flicks it out. But Usyk doesn't really throw a snappy jab. It's really just he holds that right hand out there to set up the left hand afterwards. So yeah, I suppose each to their own. Tommy says it's so crazy how styles changes between opponents so drastically sometimes. Triangle theory just doesn't work. No, I never take that on board, Tommy. I never say, well, he beat him and he beat him, so he should beat him. I never even take that into consideration, mate. And we've seen it over the journey so many times where one fighter will beat another fighter, that fighter will beat another fighter, and then the one he lost to beats the one that beat the other guy. That makes sense. The triangle effect. But no, and that's the same in any sport, any team sport, any individual sport. It doesn't really matter. Mutty says Wilder went away from waiting 36 minutes to land a right hand and tried that his hand at boxing. Hasn't worked out well so far. Well, the only way he gets back on track in any way at all, Mutty, is he goes back to what he was. I can't believe they've actually got in his ear and said, "Oh, you know that you can actually box, Deontay. You know, we can just box and move. You got a great." Come on. I think if he boxes against Zhang, I think he's going to get knocked out by Zhang. His only chance for me is to stand in center ring and try and knock Zhang out, because Zhang's not the most graceful guy. Doesn't move a lot. He'll stand right in front of you. That's the only hope I think Wilder has of winning this fight. That's for another episode. So guys, that's my tips for this episode. So I've gone for Roy Jones Jr. with a unanimous decision over Canelo Alvarez, and I've gone for George Foreman to beat Alexander Usyk, surprisingly, by decision. I'll say unanimous as well. Yep, Wilder returns this Sunday morning with a monster KO. Okay, well, let's see, Damien. So what do you think of this opinion, or my opinion on this fight, guys? Just quickly, we'll finish it up in a sec, but interested to hear your thoughts. I know the knockout thing, or non-knockout, will surprise a lot of you out there. Do you think Foreman gets a KO? Do you think Usyk wins by decision? Do you think Usyk wins by KO? Yeah, Tommy, I have Roy Jones and Foreman by decision. And again, I know it sounds silly that I have Tyson, what's his name, George Foreman, winning a decision over Alexander Usyk, but just because you're a big puncher doesn't mean you got to win every fight by knockout. So, but we'll do this again. I think every month I'm going to rotate the episodes through, but every month we're going to have a dream fight doubleheader. Let me know the fights that you want to have for the next doubleheader. We've quickly got a couple of minutes if you want to chuck them in there. These were just two that I've been thinking about for a little while. So many different dream fights out there. They don't have to be past versus present. They could both be from the past, whatever it might be. But let me know either in the chat there or direct message on Instagram, or put in the comments on YouTube, whatever it might be. But we'll have a double header next time, and we'll see how we go. What's this one, Tommy? Have we done a dream matchup, Holyfield and Usyk? No, I haven't, Tommy. We've done Holyfield against Joe Fraser. That was one of the ones we did. I think that might have been the only one I ever did with Holyfield, to be honest. We've done so many. We used to do it every week when I had the other guys on the panel. Every Tuesday we used to do a dream fight. So there's a lot of them on this channel, so check them out. But we'll bring them back up if need be, because it's okay if you guys want to discuss them. Another one I actually would like to see, it's more of a recent one, is Canelo against De La Hoya. That would be a great fight as well. That's probably one I was thinking of. But Holyfield and Usyk, love that, Tommy. We might put that into the next one. Tyson Liston. Whoa, what a fight that would be. Cool. Hopkins, Hagler. Good fight. That's a really, really good fight, isn't it? I think they'd be more like matched better. I think Roy Jones Jr. would be probably too much for Marvin, or the marvelous one, Hagler. Hopkins not as nimble on his feet as Roy Jones Jr. might. If he's just in Hagler's wheel space, might sort of play into the hands of Hagler. But that's a good one too, Glenn. Either way, we'll get all these ones up at some stage. Evander needs to chill a bit. He said again how he beat Foreman and Holmes, but he was in his prime, late 20s. They were in their early 40s. Yeah, I'm not sure what he said, Hanoi, but look, I think the run's on the board for Evander. I mean, at cruiserweight, unified the cruiserweight division, and beat an underrated Carlos de Leon. I remember he was a long-reigning WBC champion. Beat him, Dwight Muhammad Kawi as well. That was at a cruiserweight, and then moved up. And I know Foreman and Holmes, they were in the 40s, but Foreman won the heavyweight title, and Holmes, that was the fight with Holmes, was for the heavyweight title, of course, and he won against Mercer, I think, after that as well. So I don't think they'll completely finish. So they were good wins from Evander. And then you throw in the Tyson wins. Lennox Lewis, arguable, probably those ones with the draw and that as well. So One thing I loved about Evander was just that he fought anyone, anywhere, anytime. And don't forget the Bow fights. So, but then again, he struggled against Burt Cooper, didn't he? So, yeah, look, I don't know. I think Evander for me is top 5 or 6 all time for me in the heavyweight division. Just fought and beat everyone bar one or two. I think Lewis is probably in the prime I'm talking about. Lewis is probably the only one that sort of got him. Bo, of course, but he did avenge, which was, I think Bo won first, Holyfield won second, I think Bo won third or whatever it was. But yeah, no, I'm a massive fan of Vander Hanoi. David Hay, Usyk at cruiserweight. Do you give Hay any shot? Yes, I do. Tommy, that would be a great fight. Costa Zoo, Tim Zoo. Andy, sorry, late gang, but hello. You are a little bit late. We're about to finish up. We're just going through. If you didn't see, we had Roy Jones Jr. beating Canelo by decision and Foreman by decision over Usyk. So again, let us know your thoughts on that. So, all right. So we've got a little bit to work with in the future for the Dream Fight doubleheader. We'll do another one, as I said, in 3 or 4 weeks' time. We'll rotate them around with all the other shows that we do on a Wednesday and see what we can come up with. Any other ideas you got to for these episodes? Let me know. Always looking for different topics to discuss and bring up. So it's funny. I had a few comments, a few DMs about the boxing movies that I did. I think I did that a few months ago. The top 10 best boxing movies of all time. The top 10 worst boxing movies of all time. That gathered a little bit of discussion as well. Damien, are you live on Sunday? Yeah, that depends, Damien. I've made the decision, even though it's a good card, I've made the decision. I'm only probably going to get up for the last 3 fights on the card. I'm not, even though I'll probably watch the other 3 back on replay. I'm not a real good morning person. I do struggle a little bit. But I think I'll get up for Bivol and Zaned and the heavyweights, Hergovic and Dubois and Wilder and Zhang. But I might, Damien. What times is it? About 4 a.m. I think it starts. So you would think that it'd probably be 4, or would that be 6 o'clock? I suppose the top 3 fights would probably start. So we'll see, Damien. Maybe I will. I might I'll put up a notification anyway. I'll look at the schedule and see what time, but I don't really want to get up before 6 between me and you. But anyway. Hanoi, Rocky 4, is that the best? Rocky 3 for me, mate. I'm a big Rocky 3 man. I think that's the best boxing movie by a fair margin, if you ask me. I think this one starts at 4. Okay, so what do we got? So there's 3 other fights, plus the in-between, plus the rooting around. Yeah, maybe I'll go on at about 6 o'clock and we'll just see how we go. Worst case, we might miss a little bit of the probably Hergovic and Dubois would probably be the first of those 3, I'm probably thinking. Andy, what's that there? Put credit on that worst list just to get... It is on my worst list, Andy. Check it out. I'll go next time on Talking Boxing, I'll bring up my list. We won't go through it too much because there's a lot to talk about, especially after this weekend with the 5 versus 5. But yeah, Creed is definitely on the worst movie list for me, Andy. Ford versus Nick Ball is a good matchup. I'm going for Ford. I'm going for Ford as well, Tommy. But I'm going to watch it on replay. The other week knocked me around. I think I was up at around 5 o'clock or something. That was a big one. I know that's nothing compared to a lot of people out there, but I'm just not a morning person. I just can't get to sleep early. I think I had about 4 hours sleep that night. It wasn't good. I get migraines, so I don't get enough sleep. So I'm picking Zhang by stoppage. Yes, I am, Tommy. I'm picking Zhang by stoppage. Although it wouldn't surprise me at all if Wilder just lands a booming right hand and that's it. I'm just thinking that Zhang's big enough and tough enough to take the punch, but does not move. And I think Wilder could knock down a tree if he hit it right. So that's the only possible scenario in which Wilder wins for me, is that if he stands in the middle of the ring and lands a big right hand and that's it. But if he doesn't land the right hand and gasses out, I think Zhang stops him. Oh, that's not a bad one. Tommy Morrison and Usyk. Not bad at all. We've had a couple as well. Tyson and Tua. There's another one. I really like the Fraser and Holyfield fight. I think Fraser and Usyk could probably be a good one as well. So many great fights. This is just at heavyweight. I mean, look at all the fights we could have at sort of 135 to 147. The Mayweathers and Pacquiao's and Durans, Leonard, Hearns, Cotto's, De La Hoya's, Whitakers. Some massive fights. And I think the biggest or the most views we've ever had on a video might have been the dream fight we did with Manny Pacquiao and Costa Zoo. I think we had 25 or something, 27 or something thousand views on that one. I think all the Filipinos jumped on that one. But we've had De La Hoya and Zoo. We've had Pacquiao and Whitaker, Pacquiao, Duran, just some Whitaker, Duran, some great fights. So anyway, keep the suggestions coming. Zhang would put Joyce to sleep nicely. He did twice, didn't he? So there you go. All right, guys. Well, that's about an hour. That's about all I thought we'd probably get out of the episode. Again, apologies for my set here. I'll make sure it's right next time. But I really enjoyed talking the dream fights with you in this episode. And as I said, make sure you send me some suggestions in the comments or DM, whatever it might be, and I'll get them on to the next episode. So thanks, guys. I'll let all the Aussie viewers go and watch the Premier Boxing series, and everyone else go back to whatever they're doing all over the world. So thanks again, and look forward to seeing you next time on Dream Fight Doubleheader. Catch you then.